Just waiting on Brian here. Oh, hello everybody.
Yo,
Super
Yo,
excited. We're here
yo.
today for the
hi.
we're here today for the masterclass, performance to the max. Of course, before we dive in, I'm going to start us off with a quick icebreaker. Inspired by today's donuts. Is there a drink that you'd like to pair with your donut? I'm going to start with you, Brian.
Oh man, you're gonna start with me. Um, I
I'm
mean, I guess just the coffee.
gonna
Right.
say, yeah, me too, man. I got a 5-year-old. Like, he's like,
Sugar and
at
coffee.
any given point in time, he might be up at 3 a.m. So yeah, it's gonna have to be coffee for sure.
I see. I'm still young at heart, so I'll do the hot chocolate. I will feel that sugar overload and crash immediately afterwards, but I do think it's
Yikes!
worth it for the flavor composition, right?
Funny.
Okay. So I'm going to get us started now with the masterclass, performance to the max, creating a sales team culture of high performance and accountability. Today's event is brought to you by the team here, Modern Sales Pros. For everyone not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you're going to be invited to join after this event. Before we dive into the content, I'm going to go over some quick housekeeping notes. First, this event is being recorded. You're going to be able to access this recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for our panelists, please do drop them in the chat or use the Q&A function, and they'll do their best to get to them during the event. Okay, I'm going to hand things over to you, Pete, to talk about Atrium and do some intros. Take care, guys.
Fabulous. Thank you. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Ta-da. Yeah, hey everyone, thanks for joining us. I'm super pumped this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, around performance management and kind of accountability, but specifically how you do that across an entire organization. We've done some of these sessions before around the kind of like specific tactics for like an individual manager, what have you. But like the purpose of this one is to talk a little bit more of how that like looks across an entire organization from a leadership standpoint, from a revenue operations standpoint. For so Before we get started, we're Atrium is a sponsor today. Atrium, for those who don't know, make what we call data-driven sales management software that helps sales organizations use data to improve rep performance. So sales managers, sales leaders, sales operations, etc. So what Atrium does is it continuously monitors dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and then proactively alerts managers and leaders and revenue operations when something is off with your reps, teams, so on. And so what this means is that managers can get the coaching insights faster, and drive positive behavior change and win. And so that just makes the sales organization, uh, in general, more broadly, higher performance. So that's a little bit on us. We're gonna let you know who's here with us today. Myself and my esteemed colleague Brian. My name is Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. So prior to Atrium, I started and sold a recruiting software company called TalentBin to Monster Worldwide. It was acquired in 2014. And that's like really where I went from being a business generalist founder to first sales rep, sales leader. And then when we were acquired by Monster Worldwide, I was responsible for new product sales at Monster. Subsequent to that, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then also started Modern Sales Pros. So do a little bit of thinking about sales, as you can kind of tell. I'm joined today by my colleague here at Atrium, Brian Burke. Brian, you want to share with folks what you spend your time doing here at Atrium, and then maybe the role or two before that as well, so they just kind of have context on the sales motions you're familiar with.
Yeah, so I at Atrium, what I do is I'm senior sales, like you can see, senior sales strategy advisor. I help companies kind of align their go-to-market team and understand kind of what levers they need to be pulling and what levers kind of like helping top performers perform better, and also kind of understanding what that should look like over hundreds of metrics and how to kind of get that in their hands to help them improve their own sales cycles as well. Before that, I was selling at a company called Lever, applicant tracking system, and more of kind of a commodity sale there. But yeah, it's been great working here.
And then prior to being a seller, you were a professional soccer player. Come on, man, don't leave that out.
Well, you said the sales career. I wasn't really selling when I was playing soccer, but
It's related to performance and accountability. What'd you
true.
say?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there. So yeah, I played professionally. I played professional soccer for about 8 years, all over the U.S., Seattle, L.A., Florida, Louisville, Kentucky, back to Florida. My last team was here in San Francisco with the Deltas. And then, yeah, decided I did not want to move around anymore and wanted to get in sales. So, yep.
Nice. Yep, for sure. Wonderful. So what we're gonna do here is, yeah, essentially what we're gonna be talking about all day today is, why it's important to manage, why it's important to performance management and have a culture of accountability across your organization, and specifically, kind of the downsides associated with like not doing that, and then how to contend with that organizationally. Before we get started, if folks are interested, we're offering folks of one of our sweet sales nerd hoodies here. We're going to go ahead and drop the link there if you'd like to sign up for one. I'm wearing one right now. It's lovely. Um, and yeah, you can just go ahead and sign up for that. We'll get one out to you. All we ask is in exchange a quick Disco chat on how you're using data to improve performance in your sales organization. So we'll go ahead and drop that link, and you guys can sign up for that. So I think that the oftentimes the reasons why organizations don't have like a consistent culture of accountability and kind of like performance management is because it's just like not the most comfortable thing in the world for managers and leaders to foment. Like managers aren't necessarily great at it per se for a variety of reasons, but more importantly, because managers are not great at it, it doesn't just like happen naturally. So as a leader and as like a sales operations leader or a sales leader, what really ends up being really important is that like you need to systematize that, because if you don't systematize that, it's not just going to happen organically, right? Because things that are uncomfortable, people don't like, they just don't do it organically. They have a tendency to shirk those problems. And so this is kind of our joke there, is that sales managers have a tendency to like, they're happy to spend their time on anything that's not doing performance management there. And Brian, I actually wonder, when you were in your professional your professional soccer career, did you have situations like that where you had different teams where like there was less accountability and less like willingness to do performance management, or was that just kind of one of those things where it's like, look, because it's a professional athletics environment, like that's kind of table stakes?
Um, there definitely was. I can think of like maybe 2 teams where like we didn't make the playoffs, and it was basically because like people were constantly pointing the fingers, and it's like, hey, if you're not doing what you need to do, like it's just all a chain of events. Like every person on the team needs to be doing something that will affect the person next to them. And it's
Mhm.
kind of just like the same as metrics. If you're not sending enough emails, you're not like, touching your ops enough, they're not going to advance enough. So it was kind of, yeah, it just, I'd say I definitely saw that quite a bit. And like the teams that were successful, was like everyone was kind of working one, the cohesion to kind of have like that fingerprint of like make it all one team.
Yeah. Um, cool. So I think the important thing there is like the cautionary tale is that if you don't encourage your managers, you don't see it, if you don't create an environment wherein your managers are performance managing, you're gonna like, it's not gonna happen organically, and you're gonna have problems there. And we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the reasons why not managing those performance issues consistently can cause issues for your team. So first and foremost, and this is something that's like very top of mind for folks right now in more of a, what we would like to call an efficiency first kind of sales mindset versus like a growth first sales organization mindset. It's really important that reps are covering their own costs. And so like, as an example, if you assume, like, depending on your sales organization, if you assume that each account executive costs, let's say 150K a year, it's around $13,000 a month, right? And so if AEs are not bringing in that, per month, they're burning cash. And so, really what your reps should be doing is they should be delivering anywhere between 40 to 60K per month in order to cover not just themselves, but other parts of the organization, like engineering and you know, real estate and rent and so on and so forth. Right. Um, the second problem is that if you're not effectively managing low performers, either making them successful or managing them out of the organization, one problem is that they can steal or they can steal other people's at bats. And what that means is, especially in an environment where there's maybe scarcer inbound leads and opportunities. Do you want to give them to your shooters, or do you want to give them to the people who are potentially going to who are going to not hit the goal, right? And so I think that's a really important thing to be like. Certainly marketing, would prefer their leads to be given to the people that are higher win rate, right? And so if you think about your reps and can think about their win rates, if you're allowing people that are low efficiency, that are low win rate, to take at bats on the round robin or what have you, you're literally setting leads on fire there, right? And so that's just an important thing to be mindful of there. Um, the other thing too is that, and I think Brian was kind of noting this earlier as relates to his professional athletics career. Underperformance can be a little contagious as well, insofar as people may not be people are um, find it hard for them to do to keep up their esprit de corps and their level of execution when you see other people who are not executing, right? And so in this case, you can kind of see this in in metrics here, where you have a couple of reps who have a certain level of customer facing email activity, and then you see Sven here, a little frozen theme. His performance is in line with Elsa here, who's obviously a top performer, but is drags down as a result of Olaf here, underperforming. Hey man, if if Olaf's not going to put in the calories, I'm not going to, right? And then moreover, the other thing too is that not only is underperformance contagious, but also is it will chase your higher performers out of the organization, right? So even though you have higher performers who maybe are impervious to that behavior, right? They don't want to be on the same team with other people who are kind of lower performance. And like that, and so then you end up with a pretty negative feedback loop there. Where pretty negative feedback loop there of organizations ending up only with low performers in them. Um, Brian, when you've been working with your various customers, have you kind of seen some of this stuff, um, precipitating?
Yeah, and I mean the thing that's kind of interesting about this too, and what I'm kind of seeing, I had a couple I should call yesterday with a CRO, and he was like, "Hey, we're tracking, we have a scorecard where we're saying, okay, these are the metrics that we want our reps to do," but they didn't have a way of actually correlating it to down funnel activities and saying these leading indicators, like this rep, okay, she's sending a ton of emails, and they're having a hard time correlating it with down funnel activities. Like, okay, this rep is sending just as many emails as this other rep here, but you can see it's a lot less than this other person. They can't show, okay, that's actually leading to more opportunity advancements, that this person is sending this many emails, they're having this many more days between op touches or less days between op touches, and actually correlating it to opportunity advancements or bookings. Has been something that's kind of hard for managers to do with when they have just a report showing, hey, just email sent.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, and then the other thing too is that that you can end up with what we call busted recruiting and kind of onboarding. And so this can be a really big problem as well if you're not appropriately managing that onboarding and the performance in that onboarding environment. They may never get to band, right? And so oftentimes, and we actually do a master class on kind of creating a rep ramping machine and making it such that you can consistently measure and manage the successful ramp of reps. Um, if you're not effectively managing that or proactively managing that, you're not going to be able to bend this curve up and get people into, into band. Um, and so like you need to be hands-on, like your managers need to be hands-on and effectively doing that. The last thing that we're going to kind of talk about here is maybe top of mind for folks right now, where you know for folks who are in a in a venture backed companies, what have you, whether or not you're able to raise incremental rounds of financing is really contingent on what your efficiency metrics look like, your quote unquote numbers. And so the more underperforming reps you have, the higher your cost of sales, the more capital intensive your business is. That's going to lead to a lower valuation there. And so the big thing there is that not coaching underperformers is really, sorry, the last thing here is that not coaching underperformers is really a disservice to them and their career. And this is something that like can be very helpful when you're coaching your managers and enabling your managers on how to, why that this is an important thing for them to be doing. Oftentimes they don't want to be the heavy, right? Which part of my reaction to that is like, hey man, like that's kind of your job, like that's why you're a sales manager. But on the flip side, if you need to candy coat it, right, is that like, look, not coaching underperformers is really just like not helpful for them, right? Like because if they're not getting like with the right coaching, they could potentially be glowed up, and then similarly, maybe it's just like not a fit for them, right? Like maybe sales is just like not for them. Maybe they should be in customer success. Maybe they should be, maybe they should be doing something else. But like pretending that that's not the case is like not a really helpful thing there. Um, so these are some of the issues and some of the reasons why it's super important to make sure that your managers are effectively performance managing, and why having a culture of accountability and performance management ends up being super, super important. It doesn't have to be draconian, right? But it has to be real. I think probably like one of my favorite examples of this is there was the Netflix culture deck, right, that talks about how here at Netflix we value performance, and specifically, Netflix and companies are not a family; they're a professional sports team, right? And this is part of the reason why I wanted you to mention your background, Brian, is because like we're not like, this isn't a family situation. Like we're here to perform, and that means that everybody needs to toe the line and everyone needs to take care of business, and we're going to measure that appropriately, and we're going to coach where people are having shortfalls, but we're not going to put our head in the sand if people are underperforming. We're going to fix that, or we're going to move them out. And so the most effective way to do that is to is to use data, right? It's like data is the best way to both identify performance issues, but also to create to institute a data-driven management culture that enables high performance and enables accountability. Um, and so just kind of like really quick for folks, quick commercial on Atrium. This is literally like what we do. The way to kind of think about what Atrium does is like we believe that managers deserve they deserve specific tooling that's going to empower them to manage by metric. And so what that involves is like every KPI for all their reps and their teams, proactive goal tracking, early warning alerting, performance issue diagnosis, and more. And so in short, what Atrium does is it helps managers, leaders, and reps use metrics to improve team performance. We do this with hundreds and hundreds of clients right now. And importantly, what organizations see anywhere between 30 to 70% improvement in the key metrics that they're managing once they start bringing management to bear on those metrics through better performance management. So like whether that's an organization like Gainsight having substantial improvements in their pipe hygiene and stack opportunities, or company like Envoy like dramatically raising their meeting volumes and pipe hygiene improvements there. It turns out that like performance management by metric ends up driving high performance there. Cool. So the first step is, okay, like why, like, we understand why people, like, why it's important for us to measure, or for us to manage these performance issues, like, organizationally. Well, the next question is like, how do we deal with those performance issues, right? um and so Brian, I wonder if there's, like, some of the things that you've seen that are most effective within clients that you've worked with to help facilitate, contending with these performance issues.
Well, I think the one thing that's um, sometimes some people like maybe have a little like against this, but I see like in this case we just use the average versus everyone else. But usually, if we can put everyone on a dashboard or in like an alert feed and say like, hey, these are 5 metrics like untouched ops, stuck ops, and like maybe even activity metrics like meetings on calendar that we know are like really move the needle, and just send that out to the reps, you know, on a leaderboard. It makes it really easy for the rep to see, okay, this rep's like having a lot of meetings, this rep's closing a lot of business, and you can see all the things that they're doing within their sales cycle and kind of find areas that they need to maybe like that rep themselves need to improve to kind of get to that level and kind of help push like and kind of bring up like the whole morale of the org to like be better. Um, that's one way of just kind of like distributing these metrics so it shows up in their Slack and in their cal or in their Slack, and then also in email where it's just like right in front of them where they can see it instead of having to go into Salesforce, try to open up a dashboard and look at that. It's just like gets distributed right to them.
Hmm. Yeah, got it. Um, awesome. So I think the things that, like, when you think about systematizing this across an entire organization, though really, like, and what we're not trying to do here is we're not trying to do this in a one-off basis. Like, we're trying to systematize this performance, like a culture of performance management and accountability across an entire organization. Um, First, you got to make sure that there's time on your manager's calendars for feedback and coaching conversations. The second thing that you really need to do, and organizationally, is set clear expectations around levels of performance. Um, and then the third thing that you need to do is really, inspect data to detect and diagnose issues. And then importantly, you have to have conversations about these things in order to then make a plan to remediate the potential issues and then loop back additionally after that. And so this is kind of the loop by which you systematize dealing with performance issues in the organization. And then this is something that you, like, this is what an individual manager would do, but then as a leader, as an operations person who's responsible for facilitating this across like 3, 5, 10, 20 managers, etc. um, like, this is the thing that you would want to make sure that all of your managers are doing, because if all of your managers are doing this, it's gonna drive higher performance in the organization, right? um so the first thing is, like, how do you make sure that there's time on your calendar for coaching and feedback? Well, the thing that we like to say here at Atrium is that calendar is destiny. And so what that means is that making sure that you have your operating rhythm mapped out with with a series of appropriate meetings in which the space, like, there's space for these things here to, like, inspect the data and then have conversations and kind of like loop back on those things. So examples of those might be things like the pipeline review, right? Pipeline review is probably pretty easy for, most organizations are probably doing that, making sure that you're inspecting close dates and stages and um, deal sizes and what have you. Um, deal strategy is probably another example of like a specific operating rhythm meeting that would drive, that creates space for performance management and coaching. The thing that oftentimes is underinvested in is a one-on-one meeting that is focused on performance and metrics, and versus, as distinct from a pipeline review or a deal strategy meeting. And this ends up being really important, because this is like, deals are very urgent. And so so people have a tendency to always focus in on like what's bottom of funnel, what's bottom of funnel, et cetera. And what that does is that like blocks out all space for, blocks out space for other pipe, or excuse me, other performance management um, space. And then of course, like QBR meetings can be really helpful for this as well. As like after the end of a quarter or what have you, have a look back opportunity, um, in order to like look back across like what the performance might have been for that manager, or excuse me, for a given rep, in order to then make sure that like they can address those issues, um, uh, going going forward. Brian, when you kind of think about your manager, or excuse me, the clients that you work with, where's the most effective kind of like performance management happening?
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of asked because I was gonna butt in here and just kind of say like the biggest thing that I'm kind of seeing is a lot of times frontline sales managers are going into a one-on-one without a lot of data to back up some of their things. So they really kind of focus back and like it's mostly just a pipeline review. Like, hey, let's go over your, your ops that you have like in each stage. Make sure they're all those stages are updated so I can get an accurate forecast. They're not really looking at in a one-on-one, like let's pull up, you know, a dashboard or like in terms of Atrium, like let's look at your profile page, see where you're doing well and maybe where some areas you might need to improve on. Like, hey, it looks like your conversion rate out of stages 2 and 3 is a little lower than what it should be and that we're seeing. And then they kind of use that, be like, okay, so let's look at a call review. When we go into call review, let's focus on that stage 2 to stage 3 and see kind
Mm-hmm.
of like what's going differently between someone who is doing really well, that Elsa, if you're going to go back to the frozen people, and then also back down
Mm-hmm.
saying, hey, how can we get this stage 2 to 3 better?
Yeah.
And on the SDR level, it's like, hey, you're sending a ton of emails, but like it looks like your email engagement rate's a lot lower. So let's see let's find out who has a high email engagement rate and saying like, a decent amount of emails and see kind of, are they doing more customization? Who are they reaching out to? And how can we get you to that stage instead of just focusing on deals, deals, deals?
Yeah, like I think the way that I think about this is like this. I mean, it's almost like calling, instead of calling it a one-on-one, it really should just be called like a coaching session, right? Right.
Yeah.
As just like there's deal coaching and then there's like rep coaching. In fact, actually, Corey Bray, founder of Closed Loop, has a great phrasing on this. Is like you coach the player, you don't coach the play. It's like a deal is a play, right? And so you need to have space to coach the player, or else you're literally just going to be like in the weeds on this deal, that deal, this deal, that deal, which is important. It's just not the only thing, right? It's not the only thing. Um, the next step here that we kind of talked about was this notion of like setting clear expectations about levels of performance, and this is something that, organizationally, as a sales leader and like a revenue operations person, you can really help out with is, instead of just saying, hey, we're going to set quotas, maybe for AEs, we're going to, set bookings quotas, for SDRs, we're going to set opportunity creation quotas and what have you, and then say like, hey, you know what, just go ahead and figure out how you're going to get there. Instead, if you get more granular with respect to the goals that people should be advancing towards from a precursor standpoint, well, one, that'll give people guidelines as to what they should be doing in their day to day, and then also it'll give managers like more steel spine in order to say like, hey, look, like we know that across our organization we have an expectation that, I don't know, let's go to AEs here, like we have an expectation that our corporate account executives should be having 15 customer facing meetings a week, and like you, like for the last like 6 weeks you've been more in like the 7 range. That's like, it's not because I'm the heavy, right? Like I'm not a mean manager or what have you. Like this is something that this is an expectation that has been set, by revenue operations and sales leadership for the 3 corporate account executive teams, of which we are just one corporate account executive team. And so like it's not like I didn't make this up, right? Like this is what we expect organizationally. And so you and I need to work together in order to get you to that 15 customer facing meeting volume, or else it's like we're never going to get to success there. And again, like I'm not making this up because I'm the heavy. This is like what sales operations and sales leadership has aligned on by looking at historical goals, or sorry, by looking at historical performance of our top performers, and setting this expectation here, right? And so by setting kind of more granular goals on those precursors, whether for like SDRs, that's like email volume, call volume, unique accounts touched, et cetera, new accounts touched, new contacts touched, things like that. Or with account executives, it might be customer facing meetings, other activity things, but also pipe stuff, right? So like it's not just total opportunities in pipe, it's also new opportunity inflow, that's happening on a, maybe on a monthly basis or what have you. And then also efficiency metrics as well. Like, hey, we have an expectation that your win rate ought to be like this, right? Or hey, as an SDR, we have an expectation that in general, like you're sending this amount of email, making this amount of calls, but like with this sort of like email responsiveness rates. If you set those goals and set those expectations, like that bar, then that way it's a lot easier to see when people are off that bar. But also it gives air cover for facilitating those conversations, right? Um, the next thing here is like what you need to do is, if you set these goals, right? So like if you create space on the calendar and then set these goals and communicate them, well, that's, you actually then need to manage to them, right? And so what that means is recurring inspection, because you can't just like declare a situation like, all right, cool, like we have expectation that you're at this level of, these levels of KPIs, and if you never look at it, right, then people are like, yeah, those aren't actually real goals, right? Because like no one ever gets held accountable to that. And so there's a variety of ways that you can do that. And you can do that with CRM reporting or with like traditional BI. We obviously prefer dedicated data-driven sales management software there, but like the point is that you need to be consuming and inspecting these key metrics in order to diagnose like what's going on there, right? And so the mechanism by which you would do this, at least visually, is like, look for issues and then look at bright spots, as well, right? So um, looking for people who are higher performing with respect to their customer facing meeting volume, or maybe looking for people, so it's like, hey, that's awesome that like Cyril Proudbottom here, it's funny names, is outperforming with respect to customer facing meeting volume. That's fantastic. That maybe indicates to me that the rest of my team could be where you the rest of my team could be there. Or conversely, here's this person who's underperforming, I need to get ahead of that, right, in the next time interval, and help remediate that. And then the same is true with respect to trends, right? So like looking at totals is key, but then also looking at trends can be really powerful and useful there as well. Um, because that's where things, you're going to be able to see like deterioration. So as an example, you can kind of see this guy right here in the orange, Brer Rabbit. You can see like he was up here and now has kind of been deteriorating over time. So looking at both totals and then looking at trends really helps you understand where there might be shortfalls, such that then you can kind of coach around that. The next thing that you want to do with respect to inspecting key metrics is, it's one thing to kind of see where there's an issue, but what you want to be able to do is understand like what the root cause of that might be. And so the way that you kind of do this is by kind of going upstream and looking what the other drivers might be that's leading to that. And so this is this graphic, and we actually have these cool little laminates that we give to folks. Actually, maybe we can drop a link in the chat here. Right here we go. Maybe we can drop a link in the chat there around, for folks to be able to grab some of those desk references. But the idea is that all these metrics are like interrelated with each other. So for instance, if somebody has a bookings issue, what you want to be able to understand is, okay, are there bookings, like is the bookings issue coming from a low number of wins? Is it coming from a low ASP, or is it coming from a problematic deal cycle, right? Um, okay, maybe it's coming from a low number of wins. All right, well then what that might indicate is kind of one of two things. Is it a low win rate, like a low batting average, or is it insufficient, number of attempts, right? Like I'm not getting enough at bats. And so then you can kind of go upstream from there. Oh, okay, well actually it looks like this rep has a problematic win rate. Who was the rep up here that had the problematic win rate? Cloak and Dagger here, right? So like, Cloak and Dagger's got a problematic win rate. Great. What's the upstream issue associated with that? Is it because they have problematic pipeline hygiene issues, like lots of untouched opportunities? Is it because they have opportunity conversion rate issues out of like proposal or something like that? Like what's like where is that coming from? The only way that you're going to do that is by kind of going upstream and quote unquote looking right there. Brian, I mean, you've been doing this for a while. Where do you think that people, what do you think like trips people up when they're trying to like figure out the root cause of what's going on?
I think it's really them trying to match the leading indicators to the lagging indicators. So trying to just basically just following this whole train down and being like, okay, this rep's having a win rate issue. Like I can see that on a dashboard, but like I have to then try and create or look into outreach or sales ops or have my sales ops team build a activity report, and then I have to go to that report to see, okay, write this down on a piece of paper of what I'm seeing differences that are leading to, and trying to do this manually, and it's very difficult for people to kind of use that. And then that's for one rep. And then if you have
Yeah.
10 reps, it's like, how do I go into a one-on-one and do everything I need to do and then have time to actually do this for each one of my reps?
Yep.
Is the difficult part.
Yeah, and I think that the problem, and I think that points to why sometimes managers won't do that. Now, of course, the response to that is like our response to that is that that should just be automated, and that's actually one of the things that Atrium does is it just like monitors all those metrics in order to say, hey, this guy's got a bookings problem. It's coming from win rate, and by the way, the reason why his win rate is problematic is his conversion rate out of demo is like terrible as compared to everybody else. Fix that, right? Fix that right there. Oh, by the way, this rep over here, her book, she's trending poorly with respect to bookings. By the way, it's not win rate, right? It's just that like she doesn't have enough at bats, right? Like her opportunity counts are low as a result of insufficient new opportunity inflow in the trailing 60 days. Oh, got it. Like she either needs to prospect more and we need to bump her up on the round robin, right? Like and like that sort of, because all these metrics are interrelated like that, you can automatically interpret them, which is great. But even if you don't have that capability in your organization to like programmatically interpret these metrics, you still need to be doing it as a manager. At least like maybe you're not going three deep, but like bookings to win rate, and then saying like, okay, at least we know that there's a win rate problem here, right? Or at least we know that there's an ASP problem here, right? Um, cool. So then the last step we're going to talk about here is like, this is where a lot of times managers will really kind of blanch, and it's, you got to make sure that you're actually doing management, right? And as a leader, you got to make sure that your managers are doing this, right? Because as we kind of joked above with like the meme, oftentimes managers, they're not necessarily trained on delivering coaching conversations, and then moreover, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, so it's not just going to happen naturally. And so what you want to do is like make it such that you have a culture of feedback and performance conversation, to make sure that those managers are doing this. So like first, it's like training your managers on making sure that they actually do have effective coaching conversations there. So like making it comfortable to give feedback frequently and immediately, making sure that people can open with positivity and kind of reiterate the reason for the feedback. Document the relevant issues, like, hey, as we discussed, Frank, we talked about your win rate, and specifically we talked about how it looks like the problem is coming out of proposal. And kind of like what the root cause of that might be, and then we're going to talk about how, like, what the remediation plan might be, like, we can propose what we want to do in order to fix that. So just doing this, like, this is a muscle, and as a manager, if you're uncomfortable doing this, like, not doing it is like not going to help you get more comfortable. And as a leader, like, relying on your managers to do this is like not going to, like, they're just not going to, like, automatically do it on their own. So what you need to do is coach and then consistentize that. And then the next thing that really makes it powerful is just make sure that, like, it's woven into the operating rhythm. And of course, like the manager rep one-on-one is like the most effective way to make sure that that's happening, right? Because if you put, like, again, calendar is destiny. If you make sure that there's space on the calendar, if you make sure there's space on the calendar, and then two, if you make sure that there's actually like a structure to it, like, hey, this is how we do one-on-ones in our organization, right? This is the template associated with it. In this case, we have a coaching meeting template here that, like, maybe we can drop into the chat. But even if it's just like an agenda that's like in a meeting invite that all of your managers use, that's consistently, like, at least now what you're doing is you're consistentizing what we call a sales management motion. The same way that, like, you want to make sure that your reps are having effective, consistent sales motions, you want to make sure that your managers are having consistent and effective sales management motions. And so what that means is making sure that it's templated, making sure that it's systematized, et cetera, et cetera. right? And then moreover, like if performance isn't getting where it needs to go, that's where kind of performance improvement plans come in. Now, ideally, like one of our points of view on this is that like you should really never have to get to a performance improvement plan, because if you're doing a good job of doing consistent coaching, like data driven coaching and having performance conversations, it should be pretty obvious pretty quickly. Like if we're coming back to the same topic again and again and again and again and it's not getting better, like, and we are talking about it, that'll in short order be pretty obvious to the rep that things aren't getting better, and they may choose to offboard themselves. Right, which of course is like not the most ideal situation. Like we'd obviously like we prefer our reps to get better, but that's way better than like sticking our head in the sand and the folks aren't, they like not they're not getting better, and and like we're waiting around like with magical thinking, hoping that they're going to get better until like until we have to put them on a PIP, which is probably like 3 months after they should have offboarded anyway, right? Um, Cool. So then the last thing is like, hey, if you actually do have to make a plan as to actually before I bring the move on here, um, Brian, when you've worked with like some of your customers around like when they're trying to implement higher higher performance or higher accountability cultures, um, how do one-on-ones and kind of performance plans fall in there with some of your bigger customers?
Um, Well, I'd say they have like the kind of the goals, like you were kind of showing earlier, of like, hey, 12 to 15 meetings a week. They have those kind of goals as like the go-to-market org should have by pod. And then they're
Mhm.
using that and saying, okay, this rep isn't hitting this. But then they're also seeing, other than those metrics, where else are we seeing improvements that are not helping them? And you can see those and they can set those individual goals for that rep and saying, hey, for this week or this month, you need to generate X amount of pipeline. And to do that, using Atrium, we can see, okay, it's going to take you this many new accounts that you should be touching, or new prospect accounts to be touching. So they put that goal on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and a quarterly basis, usually on the weekly or the monthly basis, to make sure that they're actually hitting those targets as well. And if they're not, it makes it really easy to be like, look, like I'm trying to do everything I can to help you. This is what we need you to do. And you're still not hitting this goal. You're 30%, you're 40% behind this goal. Like, is this something you really want to work for? And it kind of helps them to
Mhm.
get to that decision.
Yep. Yeah, and then the last thing here is that like if you are in a situation where like you know either A, need to reduce the size of your sales organization, or B, I mean I think that this is something that like from a QBR standpoint just should be baked into your operating rhythm. Um, Going across like whether that's like maybe in your board meeting, and actually I did a master class recently on data driven board meetings, but just like on an ongoing basis, like just evaluating who's kind of like towing the line and who's delivering. Um, and like, ideally managers are doing that, but again, like can't necessarily rely on that. Like we have to systematize that. And this is an example of like where we can do that as an organization. So you can say, hey, look, like we're going to evaluate reps on a will versus skill basis where we can say, hey, who are the reps who have both will and skill issues? So like will, like traditionally will would be like measured by like activity metrics like prospecting, customer facing meeting volume, things like that, like essentially a level of effort. And then skill would be like conversion rates and win rates and so on and so forth. And so the people that you're going to start with first, like that you should seek to offboard, would be folks that have both will and skill issues there, right? So they've underperformed both with respect to will, like their customer facing meeting volume is low, they don't do the prospecting that they should be doing, and their win rates are problematic and their conversion rates are problematic. Those are the first ones that should be on their way. The next thing is that if you have people who, if you have to choose, the folks who have lower will metrics, like generally speaking, that would indicate like someone who doesn't have the desire to be in the organization or to be in that role. And so they may not enjoy the work, and their low LOE is not only like a problem for them, but it's also going to be a drag across the rest of the team, kind of like we were talking about with Olaf earlier on. Those would be the next folks that we'd like to go. And then generally with respect to reps who have skill issues but actually have like the level of effort that is needed, those are folks that we really want to coach them up, right? We want to coach them up because like they have the willingness to kind of to grind. Now, it may not work, right? But like we would know that as a result of our performance loops, where it's like, hey, look, you have the will. Let's go ahead and coach you up on this, this level right here. Um, and we're gonna drive, like we're gonna work to get you to that. And if it doesn't work out, like after multiple one-on-ones and coaching sessions there, then what we're gonna do is we're gonna potentially have a conversation about offboarding you. But you really, what you want to do is you want to go across like on that in that stepwise process. Anything you wanted to add on this, Brian?
I don't think so. I mean, I think you hit it. It's like, hey, if they have this, they're putting the work in. You need to work with them to try to see if they can make it.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think that's everything that we had to cover here today. Again, if folks would like to get a sales nerd hoodie and also some of those desk references for kind of metrics inspection, we're going to go ahead and drop the link here for folks to check that out. Please go ahead and do so. We'd love to send you that. And then, moreover, I hope everyone really enjoyed the session and kind of like understand why it's so important that organizations ought to be focusing in on having a culture of performance management and accountability in their organization. It's not something that you can rely on your managers to do individually. It's something that you have to systematize across your organization. Like it comes from the top down. So if that's like the CRO or the VP of sales, and then revenue operations empowering them, like that's the way that you're going to get a culture of maximum performance is by systematizing that across your team, right? And so hopefully we kind of gave folks a little bit of like insights on how to do that, why that's important to do that across your entire organization, and then how organizations do that individually. Cool. Hey, Elliot.
Hi there, Pete.
Hello.
Okay, that was a sweet masterclass there. Gonna wrap things up now. Big thank you to everyone for attending. Always love having you guys here. Big shout out to Atrium for sponsoring today's event. Make sure to check them out. Like Pete said, whole bunch of goodies available. Links to those are in the chat. Big thank you to Pete and Brian for providing the content. Recordings and key takeaways are going to be available on the MSP page shortly. Don't forget to check out our upcoming events, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.